So I could reiterate my recommendations, but I think we need to begin with the fact that we have no export controls for Canadian firms that sell surveillance technologies abroad. That needs to change. We need to be more transparent about from whom we are procuring this technology. As you heard yesterday, the Minister of Public Safety wouldn't even acknowledge who they're buying this from.
Minister, when did you first become aware that the RCMP was using on-device investigation tools like Pegasus?
Well, first, I want to be clear with the members of the committee that the Pegasus technology is not used by the RCMP. So that's the first thing I would
So clarify. What technology are you using?
Well, secondly, as I said towards the end of my remarks, Mr. Zahn, that some of the investigative techniques are kept confidential to preserve operational integrity.
I guess what it comes down to is that there's no proof that the Canadian government has been using this spyware. It's all we have on the record here is that the RCMP has used it in certain circumstances to, under judicial oversight, to go after specific serious crimes.
Well, what I heard yesterday and in reading the news, I'm hearing something different. First of all, this revelation seemed to come kind of sideways. It wasn't really done in a forthright manner. I also heard that the Office of the Privacy Commissioner was not briefed on this.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm pleased to be here today to assist the committee in its study of the device investigation tools used by the RCMP. I'm accompanied by my colleague, Gregory Smolinek, Deputy Commissioner, Policy and Promotion Branch. This study follows media reports and a response to a question on the order paper, confirming that the RCMP was using technical tools to obtain data covertly and remotely from targeted devices subject to judicial authorization. The response and media reports also indicated that the RCMP had not consulted my office prior to using these tools.
I also heard over the last couple of days numbers changing. As you heard from my colleague, Ms. McPhail, there's a pattern of law enforcement in this country using investigative techniques and surveillance technologies and disclosing them after the fact. That's not the way you build public trust in law enforcement in a country. We are better than that.
Thank you.
Because I think it's important for the benefit of this committee that we get a better sense for just what this sector looks like. I know, Professor Diebert, you talked about it being rogue mercenary companies. Can you perhaps expand on, from your research, what this sector looks like, who's acting in it, where the subject matter expertise is coming from, and why we should be concerned about that?
So very little is known about this industry. It operates in the shadows by definition. It's similar to the trade in weapons technology or private intelligence. So these firms, generally speaking, don't like to publicly disclose what they're doing or who their clients are. That makes public accountability and transparency very difficult. We at the Citizen Lab, along with several other organizations, have spent well over 10, close to 15 years investigating this industry using a variety of technical methods and forensic methods. What we found is that there is almost no international regulation around this industry. They're selling to just any government client. Most of the governments, unfortunately, in the world are authoritarian or a liberal. And naturally, they're using this technology not in the ways that we're hoping for it to be used here. They're using it to go after political opposition, civil society, journalists, activists, and others. They're making millions of dollars doing so, and they obfuscate their corporate infrastructure from investigators like us. This is a very serious global human rights and national security issue.
In respect to the RCMP's use of this Pegasus-like cell phone hacking, this committee heard yesterday that these tools have been used since 2017, and not a single consultation has taken place with the Privacy Commissioner, and they had to hear about it in the news. And you understand well, as you've demonstrated, the implications this technology can have. Do you find the RCMP's decision to keep this information from Canadians acceptable?
No, I don't find it acceptable at all, Mr. Chairman. And I actually think that I heard something slightly differently from the testimony. It sounded to me like one of the RCMP officers testified that they were using this type of technology much further back than 2017. which really is no surprise. As Ms. McPhail testified a few moments ago, there's a pattern where law enforcement agencies are reluctant for whatever reason to disclose what type of surveillance techniques they're using or specific technologies, hide them from the public, and then somehow this information gets out through media or whatever, ATIP requests, and they have to scramble to produce documents to justify ex post facto how they're using it.
You said politicians of all levels have been monitored. We don't need to name names, but can you give us a number of how many in your experience have been monitored?
No, I cannot give a definite number, considering the fact that in the concept of national security.
Is it in the 10s, in the 20s, is it in the hundreds? Can you give us something like that?
Again, it's difficult for me to mention the numbers because we work on a need to know basis. So if, for example, I have colleagues working on the Russian desk, they will not know if I'm working on the Chinese desk, some of the targets that I have. What we know for sure is that we have various foreign countries who succeeded in recruiting elected officials against municipal, provincial, or federal, and were capable to influence this way. We see that also when we see at the end of their mandate, cabinet ministers going to work for foreign companies that works directly against national security and national interests of Canada. So there's a certain concern when some people leave public office for what they've done, what they were during the public office, and what they do after public office.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
You are well over time, but that was
Mr.
quite
Chair.
an extraordinary answer.
I'll start with Mr. Professor Dybert, if that's okay, about disinformation. And we talk about the institutions that govern us and public trust. How does a concept that police, like the RCMP or police institutions, are monitoring and surveilling Canadians, what kind of impact does that have? I mean, to date, and we've heard from the RCMP, we've heard from the Privacy Commissioner with respect to exactly how many investigations have been conducted that have used audit surveillance. How does that impact public perception of the RCMP, of our governing institutions as in general, as we've seen kind of the climate of disinformation and conspiracy theories being peddled in recent events? Professor Dybert, if you have any comments on that.
Well, if I understand your question correctly, if you're implying that there is disinformation about some of the concerns that are being raised with respect to the risks and threats of this particular industry that's being that our agencies are actually contributing to financially, I think you're very wrong. We have done well over a decade of evidence-based research that has been cited widely using technical means, and we've verified hundreds of individuals worldwide that are neither criminals or terrorists who've had their phones hacked using this type of spyware by governments, both authoritarian and democratic. In one of the most recent cases in Spain, we uncovered a massive surveillance espionage operation.
Sorry to interrupt there. We're talking specifically about Canada, right? The scope of the motion and the study that we have here is specifically about the RCMP. So we're talking specifically about Canada. If you could limit your answers to that, please.
Sure. Like I said before, it's reassuring some of the remarks that we heard in the testimony from the RCMP in terms of numbers and judicial authorization. I also heard, however, those numbers change in the course of a day. I heard that the Privacy Commissioner was not apprised of what's going on. I also heard that the RCMP itself, in direct response to a question, say, yes, we undertake surveillance of Canadians, which would be silly not to say because that's part of their job. The issue is precisely the lack of transparency and public accountability, because the way that we're entering into this conversation is kind of backwards, frankly. This was disclosed it seems to me almost by accident. And we shouldn't be having a conversation like this about this important topic in such a manner. That's not disinformation. What we're dealing with here is a very important question. We need to be mature about it and talk about it forthrightly rather than cast aspersions on people who are bringing up these important issues.
Of my time, I would like to move a motion because of that very reason. I think we have had a bit too much innuendo and accusations about mass surveillance in this committee, and even outlandish comparisons of the RCMP to the German Stasi. And I think that as a committee, we should come together and show support for the important work that the RCMP does do while ensuring their accountability under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So I will read my motion and we will circulate it to members of the committee in both languages as well. The motion reads that the committee affirm that it is satisfied that the RCMP is not using Pegasus or NCO group technology, that the use of audits is reserved for only the most serious cases, that the approval of a request to use audits comes with strict terms and conditions and must be ultimately approved by a superior court judge, that the use of these tools without judicial authorization would be a criminal offense, that the committee affirmed that it is satisfied that the RCMP is not using Pegasus or NCO group technology, that the use of audits is reserved for only the most I'm repeating myself here a bit. The final line is that the committee supports the RCMP in their mandate to protect Canadians from terrorism, human and drug trafficking, money laundering, and murder while ensuring accountability. So I apologize, in my copy here, I have it repeated, but we'll send the proper copy to all members of committee. And I look forward to any questions that my colleagues might have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hefner. The motion is in order, and I did have Mr. Green, and I also see Ms. Khalid next. So that's who I have for speakers so far. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I move to adjourn the meeting.
Point of order, Chair. I vote against. Love to see how the law and order party is running away from this motion.
Mr. Dhaliwal.
Meeting is adjourned.